This is the Metro on 1019 at WDET. I'm Cary Jr. II. During this hour, we are talking about resistance against the presidential administration and pushback against vaccine protocol. We will talk to a vaccine expert about the recent measles outbreak in Southeast Michigan. But first, we're going to take a look back on the local No Kings protest over the weekend. Tens of thousands of Metro Detroiters took to the streets to protest Donald Trump. Organizers call them No Kings protests, and the marches took place in cities across the country. WDET's Russ McNamara was on the ground talking with folks about what motivated them to speak up and get out. He joins me now. Russ, welcome back to the Metro.
Good morning, Cary.
All right, so there were a number of No Kings protests across Metro Detroit, as I said, and this was the third No Kings protest in the last year. What was the turnout like compared to the two that took place last year?
It varied quite a bit. If this one, unlike the other ones, felt more scattered, a little bit fragmented. I mixed things up this time around and did not make Detroit my priority. Okay. Just because I've been to protests in Detroit. You know, you get an idea if you've been to as many as I have over the last 5-6 years. You kind of get an idea of what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So that being said, I started up in Ferndale because I lived there, and I was able to walk down to the first protest, and there was a lot of people there. Mm-hmm. This was probably the largest of the No Kings protests. Okay. And then I went out to Romulus because those folks are seeing things firsthand. Romulus, you think of, a city with an airport. Now it's a city with an airport and a planned immigration detention center. So I wanted to go there and talk with a whole bunch of different people. Go ahead.
Who else showed up there? Who showed up at these protests? What did the makeup look like?
There was a few hundred people there. I'd say between 200 and 300. Parking was at a premium, so that was part of the issue. Okay. But it was a mixture of residents and people who were concerned. Coming from other places, like they don't like the idea of having more immigration detention centers in Michigan. Mm-hmm. The largest in the Midwest is currently up in Baldwin. They converted a former prison. A big difference between that and the one in Romulus is that it's currently a warehouse. It's still a warehouse, right? So one of the people that made the drive down all the way from Chesterfield Township was Maxwell Pizzurro.
We got to make sure people understand. If you don't stand up now for immigrants, you too will be in there.
All right, that was not Maxwell, but I'm sure we'll hear from him at some other time. That was Steve Kahn of Detroit, who drove over from Detroit. He was hitting up multiple protests and just happened to be in Romulus when I talked with him there. His main concern was that, if the Trump administration goes unchecked, it's not just going to be immigrants in these detention centers.
I see. Now, Russ, there was also some other folks who were at these protests as well. One person I want to mention that you spoke to, or at least heard from, State Representative Wagella. Can you talk a little bit about them?
Yeah, like Dylan Wagella, he's a Democratic socialist. This is his district, and so he is not for this in any way whatsoever. He says that there's a lot going on in this country that should probably get the focus and the funding, and not wars with Iran as well.
He's entered us into a war with Iran that is costing $2 billion a day. And instead of our money going towards bombing, say, a girls' school in Iran, we would rather it be spent here to make sure that we are investing in our roads and our schools.
Okay, so Russ, let me know, because there was another issue, obviously, that was present at these protests outside of President Trump itself. As you said, immigration, there's Iran war. How did that war, the Gaza war, kind of show up at these protests?
If you go to any protest in Detroit, anywhere, there's always going to be a very healthy segment of that population that is just flat out anti-war. And that goes back to all the protests I've ever been to, going back to the Bush administration. People do not want war.
Yeah.
And they're fundamentally opposed to war. So they are unhappy about the U.S. Providing weapons and money for Israel to bomb Gaza. And now the United States has entered into a war with Israel against Iran. Israel, in turn, is now bombing southern Lebanon and is essentially invading southern Lebanon right now to root out Hezbollah, which, of course, has traditionally been allied with Iran. Mm-hmm. So that is the backdrop for this latest protest. I mean, you can't really pinpoint one particular thing just because there is a lot going on in the world. This isn't like a single issue protest, right? Not like we saw a few years ago after the overturn of Roe versus Wade, right? Mm-hmm. Where that was a more focused, singular protest. This is different entirely.
It's a protest, it sounds like, against the Trump administration as a whole and the decisions, particularly international policies that they're implementing.
Exactly.
Understood. Now I want to move to some of the other grievances. Of course, there are a lot as we're discussing, but we've seen the issue of the Constitution or rule of law also rise, and democracy itself kind of come up a lot. Is that correct?
Yeah, it certainly was. I talked with Joshua Stronsky. He's a Romulus resident. He's a former law enforcement officer. He actually did some of the trainings with Department of Homeland Security about a decade ago and helped train others. And, he told me that he was sworn to uphold the Constitution, and so he doesn't particularly care for what he's seeing right now from the Trump administration.
Some of the laws that he's done just completely negates our Constitution. And where are we at if we don't have our Constitution? Because it's not America.
And Stronsky did not want to really be out at the protest. He was urged by his daughter. She looked like a 10-year-old. I did not ask her age, but she looked like a 10-year-old daughter who wanted to be out there. She felt compelled. She did not like the idea of there being a detention center essentially in their backyard. That was the one thing you noticed once you got out there.
It's permeating younger generations.
You can't escape it. And you talk about parents dragging their kids to protest, but there was a lot of kids that clearly had handmade signs, so they were part of it. And one thing that is that you talk with kids and they have an idea of what's going on in the world, and they can sense bad things are happening from their parents. So if their parents are affected, it's going to bother them. They're going to be talking about it at school. You can't run away from some of these things at school. And, there has been a movement to address less of this in schools, but that's not protecting the kids.
You spoke to also some folks in some other suburban regions in Metro Detroit, Rochester Hills, Ferndale. Can you just tell me a little bit about what they had to say about why they were at the protest and what they were feeling?
Yeah, I talked with Barb Annis. She came down to Ferndale to protest with a friend in Rochester Hills. She was not overly concerned about, what Democrats should do, and she's not really overly concerned about Republicans writ large. She thinks that what she's seeing from the Trump administration is just untenable. It's morally wrong.
For me, it's not a left or right issue. It's a right or wrong issue. We have authority in government that are not adhering to norms and laws, and it needs to change. And this November, we have an opportunity to speak with our voice through our ballot in the ballot booth.
Yeah. All right. So it sounds like there's a range of issues that are coming up with a lot of these protesters. If you're just joining us, this is the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Cary Jr. II. My guest is Russ McNamara. He's the senior news editor and host of All Things Considered Detroit here on WDET. We're talking about the No Kings protests that took place across the country this weekend and in southeastern Michigan. There were over 100 in Michigan alone, with tens of thousands of protesters taking to the streets. All right, Russ, so President Trump isn't known for taking criticism well. How did he react to these protests?
Well, he kind of ignored it. There was a statement released by the White House to everybody, saying, quote, and I'll attribute this to White House spokeswoman Abigail Jackson. She said, "The only people who care about these Trump derangement therapy sessions are the reporters who are paid to cover them." I don't know if I don't know if that's true. A lot of people are interested. By some estimates, about 9 million people took to the streets. There were very large protests in Minnesota and Philadelphia and Atlanta and Chicago, New York City, L.A., Detroit. The turnout in Detroit was not overly big. The current state of protesting in Detroit's rather fractured and segmented. Different factions, different groups, all kind of fighting for control, and there's no one singular leader in Detroit. So it would be very surprising, and there would have to be a dramatic change for Detroit to show up in a way that Chicago or Minneapolis has. Of course, Minneapolis is really taking the brunt of a lot of the ICE stuff. So, I mean, that's directly part of it.
Well, I wonder, too, because, as I said before, this is the third in a year. Is there momentum building with these protests? Are they going to a specific or getting to a specific objective? Because by the third one, you wonder if it's just kind of the same stuff, or are they changing or pivoting, or are they getting more precise? Have you gotten a sense of the direction these protests are headed?
It certainly seems like there is a national, the organization on a national level has gotten a lot better. But of course, locally, things are very much different. So you have a lot of different smaller groups, a lot of different smaller protests. Because of the number of suburban protests, I think that probably hurt the overall numbers collectively in Detroit. But I think the goal currently nationwide is to have a lot of smaller protests. So, like, if you're just driving along the road, you can see what's happening. And so it's more knowing and showing off that your neighbors are interested and focused and lockstep on this.
There are obviously a lot of Democrat voters present there. I want to know if there were any meaningful amount of independent or even Republican protests at these rallies.
You'll always bump into a libertarian. I talked with one guy who did not want to give me his name, which is he's just like, and he was very skeptical of my credentials, but we had a little conversation.
Okay.
And he was very much concerned about like overreach by law enforcement, which is not uncommon. But like independent voters, nobody particularly identified, and I don't go around asking how people are. I did talk with one gentleman who said it was his first time protest. He's an Army vet, but he was fed up. Like he was in his 60s and was just like, I can't handle it anymore.
The wars?
It's like the wars, ICE overreach. I mean, he grew up in Romulus, lives in Belleville.
Okay.
And he was there with friends from who live in Romulus. And so there's a lot more people being compelled to go out and at least, show up there. And there was a lot of talk about how this is a midterm election year and how it's important to show up at the ballot box as well.
Yeah. Okay. So before we wrap up, as you just said, it's a big election year. Michigan's a critical state for both parties. You've been following the Democratic primary race for the Senate seat, and that will open when Gary Peters leaves. How do these issues people raised this weekend kind of line up? Kind of expound on that for me with the issues that candidates are talking about for this election.
Well, for the protest issues, it seemed like all the candidates are firmly against ICE, how far they want to go to get rid of it. Abdul El-Sayed is the only one saying outright abolish ICE. Mallory McNamara and Haley Stevens, they want deep reforms to the office, but not to get rid of it. Just a reminder that Department of Homeland Security has only been around for about 20 plus years. So some people are more apt to want to abolish it outright. And how much people like war. The only person that's, directly saying, absolutely no war is Abdul El-Sayed. And then you have more liberal and centrist views from Stevens and McNamara who are, who aren't in favor of the war. And it's really the messaging. The messaging, though, is clear that this is probably an illegal war by the president, but yet we haven't seen a dramatic stand by Democratic leadership yet when it comes to any sort of funding or cutting things off. They've taken that stance now with TSA, and in their attempt to cut back on the ICE budget and not giving more money for the Department of Homeland Security. However, we have not yet seen that when it comes to war.
I see. All right. Russ McNamara, senior news editor and host of All Things Considered Detroit here at WDET. Thanks so much for joining us, Russ.
Thanks, Cary.
Up next, amid a recent measles outbreak in Southeast Michigan, we'll talk with a vaccine expert about the important things to know. We'll be right back on the Metro. Stay right there.